Her own mother sold her for cash. No, seriously. Jane Whitmore was handed to Chicago's most feared mafia boss like a package. Also, mom could cash in a $2 million insurance policy when her daughter died. But the part that breaks the internet, Marco DeLuca takes one look at Jane's bruises. And instead of finishing the job, he decides to burn her mother's entire empire to the ground. This is not a love story. This is a revenge detonation.
She was delivered like a broken piece of currency, a silent offering meant to vanish. Jane Whitmore had just 24 hours of life remaining, sold by her own mother to Chicago's most notorious underworld king. The policy was set. Her body wouldn't even be a secret to keep. But as Marco DeLuca tilted her bruised face to the light, the hardened shell around the mafioso's heart fractured, and the woman who bartered her daughter's life had just sealed the most catastrophic deal of her own. If you need to know how this tale unfolds, listen with me to the very end. When it's over, leave a like and tell me from which city you heard Jane's voice tonight. I want to know just how far her story echoes. A relentless rain fell that evening, bleeding neon and shadows across Chicago's avenues. Jane Whitmore was in a dark sedan, plastic restraints digging into her wrists. The view outside was meaningless. The city ceased to be her home 3 days prior, when her mother's hand struck her for the last time in a long, painful history. Her driver was silent, so was the hulking guard beside her, a nameless enforcer she had no desire to know. She was cargo being transported, a human payment for an outstanding debt. Her mother's words still haunted her, a melody of venom coated in honey. You're finally being of some use, Jane. Of some use. The word was a bitter taste of iron and disgrace. The car stopped before a forgettable brick building, an industrial facade you would pass by and never remember. But Jane knew the whispers. All of Chicago did. This was the heart of DeLuca's domain. And Marco DeLuca wasn't just the leader of an empire, he was the empire itself. Inviolate, merciless, the very man mothers used to frighten their daughters, yet Jane's had delivered her to his doorstep like a gift. The restraints were severed. Hard hands guided her out. Rain instantly saturated her thin dress, matting her dark hair against her skin. She nearly fell but caught herself. To fall would be to surrender, a gesture she had made too many times before. The building's interior was a stark contrast, with gleaming floors, ambient light, and the aroma of rich leather and cologne. 2 guards escorted her down a corridor that seemed to stretch into infinity. Her heart pounded a desperate rhythm against her ribs, a frantic plea to flee. But there was no escape. There never had been. They paused before a solid oak door, a brief knock, and it swung inward. The office within was unexpectedly warm. A fire danced in a great stone hearth. Immense windows displayed the storm-lashed city, its lights flickering like distant fading stars. Seated behind a vast mahogany desk was Marco DeLuca. He was younger than the legend suggested, perhaps in his mid-30s. He had dark, swept-back hair, a chiseled jaw, and eyes the color of ash. His suit was a flawless charcoal gray, worn without a tie. His hands remained clasped the desk as she was pushed inside. "Leave us," he commanded. His voice was low and steady, a quiet that demanded attention. The guards wavered. "Boss, she's—" "I said leave." They obeyed. The lock clicked. Jane stood, a dripping mess on his fine carpet, arms crossed, bracing for what would come. Agony, dishonor, or with any luck, a swift end. Her mother had laid out the whole plan with that polished smile, reserved for those who didn't know the monster beneath. A $2 million insurance policy had been activated months before. All Jane needed to do was perish for the collection. What better cover than a mishap within the criminal underworld? A tragedy so unfortunate, so lucrative. Marco DeLuca remained silent. He observed her, his gray eyes tracing her features with a focus that made her shiver. It was not the predatory stare she had braced for, but something that felt like genuine perception. And Jane had been invisible for so long, she had forgotten the feeling of being seen. "Sit," he said at last. She was frozen. Her legs refused to cooperate. With a soft sigh, he rose from the desk, moving with the fluid grace of a man in complete command. He was taller and broader than she had pictured. As he moved toward her, Jane flinched. A reflex etched into her being by years of abuse. Anticipate the blow, then absorb it, but no blow landed. Marco paused 2 feet from her, his hands in his pockets. He tilted his head, his gaze cataloging the contusions on her face, her split lip, the faint outline of fingers on her neck, and the way she cradled her arm to ease the pain of each breath. "Who did this?" His tone was still low, still measured, but a new, sharp edge of ice had formed beneath it. Jane's lips parted, then closed. Words were a liability. The truth, a fantasy. "I asked a question." It wasn't a threat, just a statement of fact, as if he truly required an answer. "My mother," she breathed. The confession hung between them, both delicate and devastating. Marco's features remained impassive, save for a tightening in his jaw. He reached out with deliberate slowness, as one might approach a terrified creature. His touch on her chin was impossibly gentle, making her breath catch as he angled her face into the light. She held her breath completely. He assessed her injuries like a master craftsman finding flaws in a diamond, noting every bruise, every cut, every shadow of fear in her dark eyes. When he let go, his hand dropped, and Jane nearly stumbled, lightheaded. "Sit," he repeated. This time her body complied. She collapsed into a leather chair opposite his desk, trembling so violently her teeth began to chatter. Marco went back to his place, but did not immediately sit. He retrieved a crystal decanter, poured a measure of golden liquor into a glass, and placed it before her. "Drink this?" "I can't. That wasn't a request." With unsteady hands, she lifted the glass. The whiskey was afire down her throat, but it cleared the haze from her mind, giving the room sharp focus once more. Marco watched her, patient. "Why are you here?" Jane's voice was a ragged whisper. "You tell me," he replied, leaning back and tenting his fingers. "My information was that a payment would be made tonight to settle a debt from your mother. What I was not informed of," he continued, "was that she would use her own daughter as the payment." A harsh, brittle laugh escaped Jane's lips. "Payment? Is that her word for it?" Marco's gaze sharpened. "What would your word be?" "An assassination." The admission was out before she could contain it. "She has a life insurance policy for $2 million. She just needs me to die so she can collect." A profound stillness fell upon the room. Marco was motionless, but the atmosphere grew cold, the air itself turning hostile. "Repeat that," he said, his voice dangerously soft. So she told him. She revealed everything. The policy, the fabricated accident, and her mother's chilling smile, as she detailed how no one would question a death tied to Marco DeLuca. She spoke of the escalating beatings over the last month, all meant to create a story of an abused woman whose end was tragically predictable. She recounted the long years of isolation, of being molded into someone small, silent, and simple to discard. When her story concluded, Marco DeLuca was utterly still. His face was like sculpted stone, his eyes burning with a cold, controlled fury. "She brought you to me to be killed," he stated. It was not a question. "Yes? And still you came." Jane's laugh was an empty sound. "Where was I to go?" She ensured I had nothing and no one who would ever take my word against hers. She held his gaze, a first in her entire life where she did not shrink away. "So, I came. Because this way, at least it ends." Marco shot to his feet, a sudden move that made Jane recoil again. He saw it. He always saw it. He walked to the window, staring out at the rain-washed city. "Do you have any idea what I am?" he asked. "You are the head of the DeLuca family. You own half of Chicago. You eliminate your enemies." Her tone was clinical, a mere recitation of public knowledge. "Correct," he said, turning back to her. "I am all of those things, but I do not murder women. And I certainly do not murder women delivered to me bruised and broken like some piece of property." Jane stared, bewildered. This was not the outcome she had prepared for. "Then what will you do with me?" Marco's smile was a thin, predatory curve, holding no warmth at all. "I am going to make your mother wish she had never been born. But first, I have a question for you, and your answer must be the truth." She could only nod, her throat constricting. "Do you wish to live, Jane?" The question struck her with the force of a physical blow. In 26 years, no one had ever asked. She had been instructed, directed, and shaped by force. Her own desires were a language she had never been taught. The word fractured as it left her lips. "I truly don't know." He retreated to his desk, a fortress of dark wood, and leaned back with his arms folded. "This is how it will be. You will remain here this evening. You'll have food, a bed, and medical attention. In the morning, with a clearer mind, I will pose the question once more. If your answer is yes, if you choose to live, then we will find a way forward, you and I." "Why?" The sound tore from her throat. "Why do this for me? I am a stranger, a nobody." "You are a woman who knowingly stepped into a trap because you saw no other way out. That requires a bravery few possess." A hint of warmth touched his features. "And your mother miscalculated, believing I could be her pawn. I take being used as an affront, so see this as both a professional courtesy and a personal grievance I will settle." Jane's hands trembled anew, but terror was not the cause. It was a foreign, almost frightening sensation. It was hope. A press of a button on his desk opened the door. A woman in her mid-40s entered, her eyes sharp, her attire a severe, elegant black. Not a soldier, something different. "Elena," Marco instructed, "escort Jane to the guest suite. See to her needs and summon Dr. Ramos." Elena's eyes scanned Jane, a quick, neutral evaluation. "Certainly." On unsteady legs, Jane rose. Her gaze fell on Marco, the man meant to be her end, who was now giving her a refuge, retribution, a possibility. "I can't make sense of you," she whispered. A ghost of a smile touched Marco's lips. "Perhaps you will, perhaps you won't. But you'll be alive for the attempt." Elena guided her down corridors from another reality. Plush carpets absorbed every sound. Art on the walls held more value than all the money Jane had ever known. The quiet here was a blanket, not a shroud. An elevator ascended 3 levels, and its doors parted to reveal a room that stole the air from her lungs. This suite dwarfed the tiny flat she'd known with her mother. Vast windows framed the metropolis. A massive bed beckoned with impossibly soft linens, and the bath was large enough for 3. It was all immaculate, tasteful, and pristine. You'll find essentials in the wardrobe, Elena noted, her tone efficient yet gentle. Apparel, toiletries. For anything else, use the bedside telephone. Dial 1. It will be answered. Jane gave a numb affirmation. As Elena reached the exit, she hesitated. The physician arrives in 20 minutes. She is private. She will not probe where you don't invite her. A whispered, "Thank you," was all Jane could manage. Elena's face softened, a brief, motherly warmth appearing in her eyes. "You are secure in this place. Everything you anticipate, everything you were led to believe is a lie. Marco De Luca is a complicated man, but he does not harm the undeserving." Then the door clicked shut, and she was alone. Standing in the room's center, rainwater pooling on the fine wood floor, Jane felt the walls within her finally break. She barely reached the bathroom before the weeping began. Raw, guttural sobs that clawed their way from a place deep inside her, locked away for an eternity. She collapsed to the tiles, hugging her knees, and wept until she was hollow. The ensuing silence was new, not a void, but a calm. As she shed her drenched dress, her reflection in the glass made her freeze. The marks were far worse than she knew. Violent blooms of purple and yellow on her torso, her limbs, her neck, a cut lip, a swollen eye. She was the aftermath of a war. This is her work. This is what you endured. A bath seemed easier than a shower. Standing required too much will. The water was near boiling, a shock of pain, but she submerged herself in it, letting the burn penetrate deep into her marrow. She remained until the warmth fled, until her skin wrinkled, until a flicker of humanity returned. The doctor came precisely on time, a woman in her 50s with gentle eyes and a sure touch. Her examination was methodical, asking for consent before each contact, noting the damage without a word. 2 fractured ribs, extensive contusions, slight dehydration, wounds that time could mend. "You have more strength than you appear to have," Dr. Ramos remarked. "How most people would have broken long before this." Jane felt not strong, but fragile as glass, bound only by defiance. Still, she acknowledged the doctor's words. When the physician departed, Elena brought a simple meal of soup and bread. Jane consumed it out of physical necessity, the flavor lost on her tongue. Afterward, Elena removed the tray and lowered the lights. "You need rest," she advised. "Tomorrow will be demanding." Jane slipped between the sheets, which were as soft as she had imagined. A feeling of trespass, of being a ghost in a stranger's world, should have consumed her. But what she felt instead was a sensation lost to memory for so long. Secure. Sleep claimed her to the rhythm of rain on the glass, the city lights a distant constellation, and for the first night in an age, her dreams were not of suffocating water. Dawn arrived with a gentle glow and the aroma of coffee. Jane awoke with a jolt, her heart pounding until memory returned. She wasn't in her mother's prison nor some transient motel. She was here, in Marco De Luca's tower, in this haven. She pushed herself upright, the ache in her side a grounding reality. A rap on the door made her flinch. "It is Elena," a voice announced. "Come in." Elena came in bearing a tray with coffee, fruit, and pastries, placing it on the nightstand. "Mr. Yozo De Luca wishes to speak with you when you have finished your meal at your leisure." The time? A little past 9 o'clock. She had slept for nearly 12 hours. She ate under Elena's watchful eye, feeling that refusal was not an option. The coffee was rich, the fruit sweet, the pastry exquisite. Her system took it in like a parched desert drinks the rain. When she was finished, Elena revealed the wardrobe. It was filled with clothes in her measurements, denim, soft knits, understated dresses. How did Mr. DeLuca is meticulous. Elena offered her jeans and a gray pullover. Please dress, I will be just outside. Jane changed swiftly, glancing at her image once more. The contusions remained, yet they seemed less violent in the daylight. She tied back her hair, washed her face, and attempted to project a composure she did not possess. The effort was futile, but she made it. Elena escorted her down again, via a new set of corridors, to a room bathed in sunlight, a world away from last night's office. This space was inviting, personal. Books filled a wall. A plush sofa looked out on a secluded garden. At a small table, Marco DeLuca was reading a paper, coffee at his side. He raised his eyes as she came in. Sit. And just like that, Elena was gone. Jane took a seat. Marco neatly folded his paper and put it down. His gaze was the same as before, analytical and discerning. How are you feeling? As though I was struck by a truck. Candid and correct. He filled another cup with coffee and pushed it toward her. Dr. Ramos confirms you will recover. The ribs require several weeks. Jane clutched the mug, welcoming its heat. Why all of this? I explained last night. No, the real reason. What is your price? Her tone was firmer now, more pointed. No one offers this kind of help for free. Marco settled back, folding his arms. She expected offense, but instead, a slight curve touched his lips, the barest hint of a smile. You possess more intelligence than you let on. I had no choice. Naivete is a death sentence in my mother's world. A valid point. He lifted his cup. This is the truth, Jane. Your mother attempted to manipulate me. She orchestrated a situation to frame me for your murder, enriching herself while I remained ignorant. That irritates me. So yes, there is a price. I require your assistance to ensure she is held accountable, but I will not compel you. You can leave through that door now if you wish. I will provide cash, a new identity, a chance to disappear, unconditionally. Jane's throat constricted. And if I remain, then we will ensure she laments every choice she has ever made. His tone lowered, becoming frigid. Together. The word lingered in the air, a solemn bow. Jane lowered her mug. The trembling returned to her hands, born not of fear but of rage, a ferocious heat she had spent a lifetime suppressing. How would we do it? Marco's smile was sharp, devoid of warmth. First, your survival becomes public knowledge. We establish that you are under my care. That act alone is a declaration. Second, we compile proof of her actions, each offense, each deception. And third, he stopped, his eyes gleaming. We unmask her before the very society she courts. We will strip away all that she holds dear. Her name, Jane whispered. Precisely. She will retaliate. It is her nature. Let her try. The words were like velvet over iron. This time, her opponent knows how to win. Jane studied the man before her, a lawbreaker, a killer, someone who ought to inspire dread. Yet in his presence, she felt a dangerous surge of her own strength. Why do I believe him? Because he has been honest, and because some part of me knows he is my only path forward. He leaned in, arms on the table. So, I pose the question again, Jane. Do you choose to live? The answer came without hesitation. Yes. Good. Marco rose, offering his hand over the table. Then let us begin. Jane placed her hand in his. His grasp was solid, a warm and steady anchor, and for the first time in 26 years, she felt the touch of an ally, not a rival, perhaps even a friend. The rain had ceased. Beyond the window, Chicago was a constellation of morning light, crystalline and sharp with promise. Jane had made an art of being small, of being silent, a ghost in her own life. But in this moment, hand in hand with Marco DeLuca, something deep in her soul shifted. She was finished with fading away. And her mother had no inkling of the storm that was about to break. The first lesson began that very afternoon when Marco guided her to a smaller, more private room, its one wall of glass overlooking a quiet garden. A table stood at its center, a battlefield of file folders, photographs, and legal papers. Jane saw her mother's script on some, and a knot of ice formed in her gut. "Sit." Marco's voice was low as he offered her a chair. She took it, her gaze fixed on the table. "What is all this? The architecture of your mother's life. Every secret deal, every falsehood, every moral compromise." He occupied the seat across from her, drew a folder toward him, and laid it open. Within were bank statements, images of cashed checks, and wire transfer logs. "She's been siphoning funds from the charity she manages. 10,000 here, 20,000 there, amounts small enough to evade alarms, yet large enough to build a life of quiet luxury." Jane's hands tightened into stones. She swore the charity was always on the edge of ruin, that we could never afford a single comfort. She was lying. Marco pushed another file forward. "She also maintains 3 separate accounts through shell companies, has offshore assets in the Caymans, and a condo in Miami purchased with untraceable cash." He tapped a document. "Your mother's net worth is somewhere around $8 million, all while she convinced you that you were destitute." The room began to spin. Jane clung to the table, fighting for breath against the inferno igniting in her chest. 8 million. While she had cycled through 3 threadbare outfits, while she had survived on instant noodles because groceries were a luxury, while she was told endlessly that she was a weight, a liability, a waste. Why? The word escaped her, strangled. Why would she do it? For control. Marco's tone was stark, the sound of a man who had seen this brand of cruelty 100 times. Money buys choices, choices grant power. She deliberately kept you powerless. Jane looked at him, her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall. "And the insurance?" Marco produced another folder, this one noticeably thinner. Inside lay a copy of the policy. $2 million with Jane's name as the insured, and her mother as the sole beneficiary. The effective date was just 4 months prior. "She purchased this right after your 26th birthday," Marco stated. "Old enough that you were no longer a dependent in the eyes of the law. Old enough that your sudden demise might not provoke too many questions. She engineered this. It was not a question, but a chilling certainty." Jane saw it then, with terrifying clarity. The recent escalation of abuse, the engineered isolation, the slow, methodical crafting of a story where her death would appear tragic, but ultimately expected. "How long have you been aware of this?" "Since last night. I made some inquiries after you were asleep." Marco shut the folder. "Your mother contacted a business acquaintance of mine 2 weeks ago, mentioning a significant payment was due and asking if I might consider an alternative form of collateral. I insisted she'd deliver it herself. I needed to see precisely what she was trading. And she was trading me, yes. But she made a fatal error." Marco's eyes became chips of ice. She believed I was the kind of man who didn't ask questions, that I would see you and recognize only an asset. She was mistaken. Jane stared at the papers strewn before her, at the black and white proof of her mother's treachery. A part of her yearned to turn away, to unsee it all. But the other part, the one that had taken Marco's hand that morning, wanted to sear every single word into her memory. "What is our next move?" she asked. "We hold this, but we don't play it yet." Marco collected the files, creating a neat, damning stack. "Before anything else, we have to ensure you are prepared. Your mother will come looking for you. And when she appears, you must possess the strength to meet her gaze without shattering." "I will not shatter." The words were a vow, sharp and venomous. Marco observed her, his head tilted. "You believe that now, but she has had 26 years to build a prison inside your mind. That is not a place from which one simply walks away." "Then show me how." Jane leaned in, her gaze locking with his. "You promised we would face this together, so teach me." A subtle change occurred in Marco's expression. Not quite praise, but something close. "Very well. Lesson 1. Cease apologizing for the space you occupy." "I don't." "You do. You shrank when Elena entered the room earlier. You recoiled when I held your chair. You offer thanks for courtesies that require none." His tone was resolute, but not cruel. "You have been conditioned to vanish. I require you to be seen." Jane swallowed against a sudden tightness in her throat. "I don't know how to be seen." "We will begin simply." Marco rose, motioning for her to follow. "Walk from one side of this room to the other. Do not hunch your shoulders. Do not let your eyes fall. Carry yourself as if you own this place." The command was simple. The act was not. Jane got to her feet, her shoulders instinctively curling inward as she took one step, then another. Midway across, she found herself staring at the floor and wrenched her chin upward. It felt alien, vulnerable, like an invitation for attack. "Again," Marco said. She walked back, fought to straighten her spine, and faltered. Again, and again, and again. For 20 minutes, Marco had her traverse that room until her lungs burned and her muscles quivered. Each time she slumped, he corrected her form. Each time her gaze dropped, his voice cut through the silence. It was grueling, it was humbling, and it was in some strange way freeing. At last he raised a hand, an improvement, far from perfect, but an improvement. Jane sank into the chair, her breath ragged. "Does this ever become easier?" "In time. At this moment, you are fighting a lifetime of programming. That requires patience." Marco poured her a glass of water from a pitcher on a nearby table. "But you are already showing more resolve than most would. Most people weren't raised by my mother." "True." He passed her the glass. "Which is precisely why you will endure what is coming." Jane drank, the cold water a balm on her raw throat. "And what is coming? You will learn to strike back, not just with your hands, though we will cover that as well, but with your words, with your very presence, with the power to look another soul in the eye and make them know you are without fear." Marco perched on the edge of the table, his arms crossed. "Your mother's greatest weapon is fear. We are going to disarm her." "How?" "By making you untouchable." The word settled on Jane's shoulders like a mantle. Untouchable. It sounded like an impossible dream, but no more impossible than sitting in a Mafia Don's fortress, plotting against the woman who gave her life. "When will she learn that I'm alive?" Jane asked. "Soon. I am arranging for a message to be sent this afternoon." Marco's smile was a razor's edge. Nothing direct, just enough to inform her that the recent delivery did not proceed as she had intended. Jane's heart began to hammer. She'll come here, it's likely, and when she arrives, you will be prepared. He pushed away from the table. Let's go. There is someone I need you to meet. They exited the room, navigating more corridors. Jane found herself mentally mapping the compound, learning its silent language before they took an elevator down 2 levels. When the doors slid open, they revealed what appeared to be a private gymnasium. Weights, punching bags, and padded mats covered the floor, and at the center of it, a woman in athletic wear was executing a sequence of what looked like punishing kicks. She paused upon seeing them, her breath coming in hard pants, dark hair secured in a severe braid. She was perhaps 30, built of compact muscle, and wore the kind of faint scars that spoke of history. Jane, this is Risa, Marco said. She is going to teach you how to defend your life. Risa's eyes swept over Jane, her assessment purely professional. Have you ever been in a real fight? Not one that I've won. Good. That means you have no bad habits I need to break. Risa snatched a towel, dabbing sweat from her brow. We will begin with the fundamentals, your stance, your movement, and how to strike without shattering your own bones. Is that clear? Jane managed a nod, her throat constricted. Excellent. Go get changed. There is equipment for you in the locker room. Risa motioned to a door in the far wall of the space. And leave your fear outside. It has no use to you in here. Marco's hand rested on Jane's shoulder for a brief, steadying moment. You can do this. Jane was not entirely convinced he was right, but she walked to the locker room regardless, changing into the training clothes that had been left for her, perfectly sized. She returned feeling like an imposter in her own skin. Risa stood waiting, her focus absolute. All right, Risa said, let me see your stance. Jane had no concept of what that entailed. She just stood, her weight shifted to one leg, arms hanging limply. Risa began to circle her like a predator. You need balance. Feet set apart at the shoulders, knees bent slightly, hands held up to shield your face. Risa showed her the position, and Jane mirrored it. Better. Now, when someone comes for you, what is your first instinct? To run. Incorrect. Well, not entirely. Running is smart when possible, but when it's not. Risa moved with startling speed, her hand locking round Jane's wrist. Jane recoiled by reflex, stumbling backward. You see, you pull away. It's what they anticipate. Instead, you move toward them. You erase the distance. You strip them of their advantage. She guided Jane through the movement in slow motion. Jane attempted to follow, her mind at war with 26 years of flinching away from threats. It felt unnatural, suicidal, as if every fiber of her being was screaming to do the exact opposite. Again, Risa commanded. They practiced it again and again. Simple movements, basic parries, the art of breaking a hold. With every punishing motion, a fire ignited in Jane's ribs, but she met the pain with clenched teeth. Risa was an unyielding force, correcting without scorn, pushing her to the edge, but never over it. An hour passed, leaving Jane slick with sweat, her body trembling with the ghost of effort. That's enough, Risa stated. You held your own more than I anticipated. I feel like that truck hit me all over again. Risa offered a rare grin. It means the lesson is taking hold. Shower, get some food. We continue tomorrow. Jane staggered to the locker room, shedding her drenched clothes and letting a scalding shower silence the screaming in her muscles. Emerging, she found Elena, a quiet storm of efficiency with fresh clothes, A presence Jane was learning to value. Mr. DeLuca requests your presence for dinner, Elena announced. 7 o'clock, main floor dining room. Jane's mind stalled. Dinner? Indeed. Don't dissect it. A ghost of a smile touched Elena's lips. His bite is rarely fatal. The meal proved less of a gilded cage than Jane had braced for. The room was tasteful, not gaudy. Soft light fell on a table for 12, yet set for only 2 at its head. Marco was waiting, sleeves pushed up, his attention on his phone. He looked up as she entered. Riza says you're unyielding. That's a virtue. Jane lowered herself into a chair, aches echoing. She likely also mentioned I'm hopeless. She said you're unshaped. There is a difference. Marco poured wine, first for her, then himself. The unshaped can be molded. The hopeless are merely lost. Elena materialized from a doorway Jane hadn't seen, placing plates before them. It was simple pasta, perfectly made, with bread and a salad. A meal of comfort, not of performance. Eat, Marco commanded gently. You earned it today. Jane lifted her fork, a sudden sharp hunger taking over. The food was a revelation. A low sound of appreciation escaped her, and Marco's laugh broke the quiet. Acceptable? I can't remember the last time I ate something this real. Become accustomed to it. Rosa has been my cook for 10 years. She'll take it as a personal insult if you leave anything. A comfortable quiet settled between them as they ate. Jane braced for the turn, the inevitable interrogation, the unveiling of plans. But he simply ate, refilling her glass, letting the silence breathe. Finally, the tension became too much. Why are you being kind to me? Marco placed his fork down. You believe this is kindness? Isn't it? This is practicality. You're of no use to me shattered. He leaned back. But if you're asking why you're not being treated as a chess piece, it is because I see no need. Your motivation is already aligned with mine. You want what I want. Why complicate the path? Most men in your world wouldn't make that distinction. I am not most men. Marco's eyes were unwavering. And for what it's worth, I find no satisfaction in harming those who are undeserving. Your mother has earned her fate. You have not. Jane stared at her plate, a tightness seizing her throat. I don't know how to do any of this. You're managing. I am terrified. Good. Terror is a whetstone. It keeps you sharp. Marco raised his glass. But do not let it command you. There is more strength in you than you know. Everyone keeps telling me that. Jane's voice fractured. But I don't feel it. I feel like I'm one misstep from shattering completely. Then shatter. But do it in here, within these walls, not out there for her to witness. The raw honesty of it struck her like a physical blow. She met his gaze and saw not pity, but recognition. The quiet acknowledgement of a fellow survivor who had rebuilt himself from ruins. Did you have someone? She asked, her voice low. Someone to teach you this? Marco's expression became a mask. For a second, she thought the question would hang unanswered. He sighed. My father, his lessons were not gentle, but they were thorough. Was he like you? Worse. Marco finished his wine. He ruled with fear. I learned early that fear is a fragile throne. It holds only until the subjects are no longer afraid. Is that our plan? To make my mother afraid? No. Our plan is to make her irrelevant. Marco's smile was a sliver of ice. Fear would grant her power. We are going to strip all of hers away. The concept settled in her bones. It felt right. It felt like justice. Her mother's life's work had been to erase Jane, to make her small and powerless. This reversal was poetry. After dinner, Marco escorted her to the elevator, his posture relaxed, his face unreadable. "Rest," he said. "Tomorrow will be more difficult." "Difficult in what way?" "You will see." Jane wanted to know more, but a deep weariness was pulling her down. She nodded, entered the elevator, and watched his form vanish as the doors slid closed. In her room, she fell onto the bed, still dressed, staring into the dark. Her old phone, the cracked relic from her previous life, sat on the nightstand. She had powered it down days ago, terrified of the ghosts it might contain. But a morbid curiosity gnawed. With a slow hand, she reached over and brought it to life. 17 missed calls, all from her mother, 12 messages. Jane's hands shook as she opened the thread. "Where are you? Answer me. This is a spectacle, Jane. You're causing a scene. Call me this instant." The final text was from that morning. "I know where you are. This will not end well for you." A knot of ice formed in Jane's stomach. She read the words until they swam before her eyes. Her mother knew. Of course she did. And she was furious. A sharp knock on the door made her flinch. "It's Marco." Jane pulled the door open. He stood there, his face a grim mask, a tablet in his hand. "Your mother just made her move." He angled the screen so she could see. It was a social media profile, her mother's public facade, the one followed by 50,000 people who saw a saint. The post was a photo of a younger Jane, her smile strained at some gala, with a caption that read, "My heart is shattered. My daughter has been gone for 3 days. If you have any information, please contact me. She is not well, and I am sick with worry for her safety. Hashtag help find Jane. Hashtag missing person." The comments were a flood of sympathy. Hundreds of strangers offered prayers, shared the post, lamented the tragedy of it all. Jane's hands curled into fists. She's playing the victim. Yes, it is her greatest talent. Marco lowered the tablet. "This is precisely the move I foresaw. She is crafting a story. You are the unstable child, she the tormented mother. When you reappear, she will say you were taken, coerced, brainwashed. So what is our move? We allow her to set the stage. We let her believe she holds all the cards." A sharp, dangerous smile touched Marco's lips. "And when the audience is largest, we will show them the monster behind the curtain." "When do we do that?" "Soon, but first you must be ready." He offered her a card of heavy, embossed stock. "Dr. Levin is a therapist. She specializes in situations like yours. Your appointment is for 10 o'clock tomorrow." Jane looked at the card. "You think I need a shrink?" "I think you have been wounded. There is a difference." Marco's tone softened. "You cannot win this war carrying the weight of the last one. Dr. Levin will help you set it down." Jane wanted to refuse, to insist on her own strength, to claim she could face this alone. But the truth was a bitter pill. The panic, the flinching, the echo of her mother's voice. The poison was still inside her. "Okay," she breathed. "Good." Marco started to leave, but paused in the doorway. "Jane, you are holding together better than you realize. Do not forget that." He was gone before she could form a reply. Jane shut the door and sagged against it, a shuddering breath escaping her lips. Her phone buzzed, a new message from her mother. "You cannot escape me." Jane stared at the words, then with a slow, cold deliberation, she typed a reply. "Watch me." She pressed send before doubt could intervene. She turned the phone off, put it away, and for the very first time, she felt no need to be sorry. The morning arrived too quickly. Jane awoke to sharp sunlight and Elena's soft knock, a breakfast tray in hand, a gentle reminder of the appointment. She ate without tasting, pulled on jeans and a sweater that felt alien in their proper fit, and pushed away thoughts of the coming hour. Dr. Levin's office was a 20-minute drive away, a discreet building, a quiet refuge. The waiting room was empty. A door opened, and a woman in her 50s, her hair streaked with silver, her eyes kind, beckoned Jane in. "I'm Dr. Levin. Please call me Sarah if you prefer." Jane sat, her hands twisted in her lap. "Marco arranged this. I know, he provided the outline, but I need to hear the story from you, in your own words. Why are you here?" And Jane, who had been raised in a house of secrets, who had learned that truth was a weapon used against her, began to speak. She gave Sarah the whole ugly truth, the violence, the suffocating control, the isolation, the insurance policy, the way a single look could strip her of all worth. Sarah just listened, her pen scratching occasionally, her face a mask of calm attention, free of pity or shock. When Jane's voice finally fell silent, Sarah put down her pen. "What you are describing is a textbook case of systematic abuse. Your mother built a prison around you your entire life, designed to ensure you never found the will to escape. The very fact that you are in this room is proof you are far stronger than she ever intended." Jane's throat constricted. "I don't feel strong. Courage is not a world without fear. It is the act of taking a step while trembling." Sarah's voice was soft. "Jane, this healing will not be swift. It will not be gentle, but it can be done, and you have already begun the climb." "Which step?" "You made the choice to exist." The words found a home deep in Jane's soul. She had not seen it so clearly, but Sarah's truth was undeniable. In the blur of the storm and Marco's sanctuary, a decision was made not to fade away, not to grant her mother a final victory. For 1 full hour, they spoke. Sarah offered her rituals, anchors for the soul when the terror surged, methods to distinguish her mother's echo from her own voice, and blueprints for rebuilding a self not forged in fear. "I want to see you 2 times a week," Sarah offered as their time concluded. "More, if the darkness calls. This will grow more difficult before it finds the light, especially when you face her. Marco believes it will be soon. And so, we will arm you together." Sarah presented a small card. "My number. Call me whenever you need to, day or night. I mean it." Jane held the card, her fingers clutching it as if it were a prayer. "Thank you. Do not thank me now. Thank me when you are standing on the shore, looking back at this storm." At the safe house, Jane found Marco in his study, the phone a dark line against his ear, his face a mask of stone. He motioned for her to take a seat. She obeyed, listening to the fragments of his war. "I am indifferent to her offer." "The answer is no." A silence. "I am not in the habit of dealing with those who would sell their own flesh and blood." Another weighted pause. "Inform her that if she makes contact again, I will ensure the world knows the creature she truly is." He ended the transmission, the phone landing with a sharp crack. "My mother?" Jane whispered. "Her counsel. It seems she's open to terms, demanding to know the price for your return." A harsh, empty sound escaped Marco's lips, as if you are a misplaced parcel. Jane's hands tightened into stones. "What was your reply?" "That she can find her own way to hell." Marco pressed his fingers to his temples. She is advancing. The post on social media has caught fire. They are searching for you. She has reported you as a missing person to the authorities. Can she force me to return? You are 26. By law, she cannot. But she is weaving a narrative that you are mentally unwell, that I have bent your will, taken you. Whatever tale paints her as the grieving victim. Jane felt the familiar ice of terror seize her lungs. So, what is our move? Marco's eyes met hers, holding them fast. We prove her a liar, and we do it in a way that leaves no room for doubt. How? He pushed a folder across the polished wood. Within lay an invitation, etched in gold on heavy stock, for the yearly Chicago Children's Foundation Gala, her mother's stage, the theater for her performance as the city's selfless saint. This is in 2 weeks, Marco stated. Your mother will be in attendance, as will 500 of Chicago's most powerful souls, and several journalists among them. Jane's pulse hammered against her ribs. You want me to be there. I want you to let them see you. Alive, whole. And then we will let them see her. A smile touched Marco's lips, all sharp edges and cold promise. You told me you wished to fight. This is the battlefield. Jane looked at the gilded paper. 2 weeks, 14 days to forge herself into a woman her mother could not break. One who could face a sea of strangers and speak her truth without shattering. The task felt monumental, but so had simply breathing until now. All right, she breathed. We do it. Marco's face changed, hinting at pride, or a feeling adjacent to it. Then our preparations must begin. The 14 days that followed dissolved into a storm of focused purpose. A new cadence took root in Jane's life. Unsettling at first, then essential. Mornings were spent with Riza in the training room, learning to occupy space as if she were born to it, not merely borrowing it. Afternoons belonged to Sarah, excavating the calcified layers of old wounds. Evenings were with Marco, studying the faces and the treacherous currents of Chicago's high society. Who is this? Marco displayed a photo of a man with silver hair and a suit that cost a fortune. Jane studied it. Richard Carmichael holds the deeds to 3 downtown hotels, is on my mother's charity board, wed to a woman 2 decades younger, and nurses a secret fondness for gambling. Excellent. This one? A second photograph, a woman with unforgiving cheekbones and eyes that missed nothing. Patricia Weston, a titan of real estate who despises my mother with a polite venom. They contend for the same benefactors. Marco placed the images down, a flicker of approval in his eyes. You are learning this game. It feels like preparing for an exam I never chose to take. That is what it is. But if you do not pass, your mother prevails. He poured coffee from a carafe Elena had left, pushing a cup toward Jane. These people, they are circling predators. They will offer your mother their smiles while she is of use and will descend upon her the moment she is wounded. All we must do is give them a reason. Jane cupped her hands around the porcelain. And you're certain this will succeed? That my word will weigh more than hers? They will be given no alternative, not when they are shown the ledger. Marco turned his laptop to face her. The screen glowed with ledgers, messages, papers Jane had never laid eyes on. My sources have been diligent. For 7 years, your mother has treated this charity as her own private treasury. Phantom staff, fabricated costs, contributions vanishing into anonymous accounts. It is all accounted for. As Jane navigated the files, a cold nausea churned within her. How did this darkness flourish for so long? Because the world wanted to believe her narrative. She is captivating, magnetic. She spins a beautiful story about saving children while looking divine in an evening gown. Marco's tone became like cold iron. But a captivating story only lasts until someone reveals the truth. And you will reveal it at the Gadlush. We will. Together. Marco shut the laptop. But this hinges on your readiness, on your ability to stand in that hall and not crumble when her gaze falls upon you. Jane held his stare. I will not crumble. You believe that now, but she understands every weakness you possess. She has had 26 years to map your soul. Then my will must be stronger than her knowledge. Jane placed her cup down, her jaw set. I am not the girl she sold 2 weeks prior. You saw to that. A shadow of something unreadable crossed Marco's features. Perhaps pride, perhaps worry. Simply remember, this is not about revenge. This is about justice. There is a distinction. Is there? Jane could taste the acid in her own words. From where I stand, they appear indistinguishable. Marco settled back into his chair, observing her. Revenge is an emotion. It is a flash fire, consuming, but it dies quickly. Justice is a structure. It endures, and it rebuilds what was laid to waste. He paused. Your mother stole your entire world. We are not merely reclaiming it. We are ensuring she cannot cast her shadow over anyone else. His words settled deep in her marrow. He was right. This was larger than her own agony, larger than the map of scars her mother had drawn upon her. There were other souls in the dark, people who had put their faith in a lie, and maybe other girls like her. Okay, she whispered. Then, for justice. The days merged into a single, focused stream. Jane's ribs mended to the point where movement no longer brought a gasp of pain. Her time with Risa transformed from lessons in survival to lessons in power, every strike forging a core of steel where terror once resided. Sarah guided her in recognizing her mother's echo in her own mind, teaching her how to cast it out, how to weave new thoughts that were not centered on making herself disappear. And Marco was a constant, silent presence. He would materialize in the gym to observe her progress, offering a quiet adjustment to her form. He would sit with her through dinner, a silent witness as she spoke of the struggle of dismantling a lifetime of ingrained fear. He never spoke of debt, never implied she owed him anything for this salvation. It forged a trust in her deeper than any she had ever known. A mere 5 days before the gala, Elena entered Jane's room carrying 3 shrouded forms. Mr. DeLuca commissioned these for you, she said, placing them within the wardrobe for the gala. Jane opened the first garment bag and her breath caught. The gown within was the color of a moonless sky, its lines clean and powerful, a world away from the garish finery her mother had always forced upon her. This was the attire of a woman, not a doll. It spoke in a commanding whisper. It is exquisite, Jane breathed. Put it on. We must check the fit. Jane moved into the silk, and it settled over her like a second skin, not confining, but complete. In the mirror, a stranger stared back at her. The last of the bruises had softened into pale, yellowed ghosts. A stylist had given her hair a deliberate shape, erasing the look of neglect. She appeared to be a woman of consequence. He has a discerning eye, Elena remarked, smoothing a nearly invisible seam. He always has. Jane turned, seeing the reflection from new angles. What is the reason for all of this? Truly? Elena's gaze softened with a hint of sorrow. You would need to ask him, but if I were to venture a guess, I would say you remind him of someone, or perhaps of a version of himself long ago. She straightened a perfect fold. Mr. DeLuca does not offer his help readily, but when he does, his commitment is absolute. You are fortunate. Luck feels like a distant country. You draw breath, do you not? And you are poised to bring ruin to the one who wished you dead. That is not fortune, child. That is survival. Elena took a step back. The gown is perfect. I will have your shoes brought up. Long after Elena departed, Jane remained before the mirror. The woman who met her gaze seemed capable, formidable. She was not the shattered thing dragged from the storm a fortnight ago. Yet beneath the perfect dress and the artful hair, Jane could still feel it. The cold serpent of fear nestled deep within her, waiting. What if, upon seeing her mother, she simply locked up? What if every ounce of her preparation turned to dust the moment they shared the same air? A soft knock pulled her from the spiral. "It's me," Marco's voice announced. Jane opened the door to him. He was in his usual costly suit, but his expression carried an uncharacteristic softness. "Elena mentioned the dress fits well." "It does, I appreciate it." He waved away her thanks. "Come with me. There's a sight you need to see." He led her to an unfamiliar floor, beyond a secured entrance that demanded both card and print. The room beyond was a scene from a thriller, filled with screens, humming servers, and two figures at their posts who briefly acknowledged their arrival. "Here is where the case was assembled," Marco stated. "The entire presentation for the gala, I need you to witness it first, to ensure you are prepared." A young, lanky technician, headphones draped on his neck, brought a file to the central monitor. It was a montage. The video opened with her mother's public facade. Clips from fundraisers, beaming for the press, clutching trophies, speaking of protecting the innocent. Then the mask came off. Financial statements scrolled by, discrepancies illuminated, transfers to hidden accounts, messages detailing the concealment of funds and the silencing of others. The photographs appeared next. A small, bruised Jane, school pictures where the hurt was visible in her eyes if one dared to look. Sealed medical files somehow procured by Marco's team, each page a testament to years of concealed torment. Excused, dismissed, and unseen by those meant to be her guardians. Finally, the life insurance policy filled the screen, annotated to reveal its cold purpose, the sum, the recipient, the timeline. When the screen went black, only the machines hummed. Jane's hands trembled. "You found all this?" "Much of it existed, hidden in plain sight. We simply drew the lines between." Marco gestured to the technician. "This runs on every monitor in the hall for 4 minutes, long enough to land the blow, brief enough to command their gaze. She will refute it all, naturally, but denials are meaningless against such stark proof." Marco's tone was unwavering. "The press will seize it. An investigation will be unavoidable. Her patrons will vanish. Her entire world will crumble." Jane gazed at the empty monitor. This was the instrument of ruin they had forged, and its power was absolute. "I wish to add one thing," she announced. Marco lifted a brow. "And what is that?" "A personal statement." "From myself after it concludes." Jane met his gaze directly. "I want to face the camera and articulate precisely what she did, using my own voice." "Jane, there's no need." "Yes, there is." Her tone was resolute. "You spoke of justice. Justice requires the victim's voice be heard. It is time for me to be heard." Marco observed her for a silent, waited moment before acquiescing. "Very well, we shoot it tomorrow, and it must be perfect. A single attempt, No retakes. You must be prepared. I'll be ready. That evening, Jane sat and composed her words, rewriting them over and over, striking any phrase that echoed with rage or fragility, anything that resembled the broken child her mother molded. The final text was pure, candid, and ruinous in its lucidity. They filmed it the next day in Marco's study. It was only her, seated, addressing the camera. No cosmetics concealed the healing marks, no pages were in her hands. Just Jane, her gaze fixed on the lens, as if speaking to every soul who had accepted her mother's deceit. "I am Jane Whitmore," she started, her voice unwavering. "The person you call Charlotte Whitmore, the humanitarian and child advocate, is the very same one who brutalized me, manipulated me, and traded my life to a stranger, believing my death held more value than my existence. All that you have witnessed tonight is fact. Each paper, each file, each image, this is her true self, and my silence is now over." When she finished, a stillness fell. The cameraman muttered a word of praise and quickly departed. Marco remained, arms folded, his face a mask. "Was it too much?" Jane ventured. "No, it was perfect." His tone was gravelly. "There is no coming back from this for her." "Good," Jane replied, rising on trembling legs. "That is my intention." 3 days prior to the event, her mother played her hand. It was mid-afternoon. Jane was with Reese in the training room when Elena's tense figure filled the doorway. "Jane, they need you upstairs immediately." A chill in Elena's voice sent dread through Jane. She trailed her to Marco's study, finding him by the window, phone to his ear, his frame rigid. "I am not concerned with the warrant you believe you possess. You will not enter this place without." He paused, listening. "Then my counsel will see you at the station." Concluding the call, he turned to Jane. "Your mother has claimed to the authorities that I abducted you. They intend to conduct a wellness visit." Ice flowed through Jane's veins. "Is that something they can do?" "Legally, perhaps, but they will not enter unchallenged. You are of age. You are here by choice. They have no grounds." Marco's jaw set. "This is her gambit. An attempt to corner you, to force a choice between returning to her or escalating this." "I will not go back," she said with fire. "No matter what they claim, I am not returning." "Then we confront this head on. You will speak with the officers. Inform them you are here voluntarily, that you are unharmed, and that she is the aggressor." Marco stepped toward her. "Can you do this without faltering?" Jane reflected on the past 2 weeks, the drills, the counseling, the arduous path to forging a person who could endure. "I can." "Excellent. She anticipates your collapse. We will demonstrate her error." Within the hour, 2 constables arrived. Marco received them in a meeting room, his attorney at his side, while Jane sat opposite, her hands clasped, resolved to conceal her terror. The senior officer, a woman with weary eyes and silver hair, observed Jane intently. "Miss Whitmore, a report suggests you are detained here involuntarily. Is this correct?" "No," Jane replied, her voice steady. "My presence here is my own decision. Your mother believes differently. She is deeply worried for you." A bitter laugh almost escaped Jane. "My mother worries for her image, nothing more." The junior officer leaned in. "She presented your social media activity, noting weeks of silence. It is not the conduct of someone who is secure." "What is not normal," Jane countered, "is a mother who batters her child and then reports her missing to conceal the crime." She rolled up her sleeves, bearing the discolored marks. This was her work, and there was far worse before. "My reason for being here Marco DeLuca gave me refuge when my own mother attempted to arrange my death. The officers traded a look. The woman produced a notebook. That is a grave allegation. It is also the reality, and I can prove it. I have health records, testimony, and the financial papers for the policy on my life. Jane held the woman's gaze. Examine my past. Speak with the physicians from my childhood. The pattern is there. The questioning continued for another 20 minutes. When it concluded, both officers seemed unsettled. The elder one offered Jane a card. Should you require assistance, use this number, Victim Services. I am receiving help now, Jane said, looking to Marco. I am precisely where I should be. Once they had gone, Marco's attorney gave a nod of praise. You managed that expertly. They will not return. But Jane understood. Her mother was not finished. She would find another way, something more vicious. Jane was not wrong. The following day, her phone vibrated her awake. It was a new device with a private number known to very few. The message was from a blocked source. Do you feel safe? Do you believe he can shield you? You remain my child. You will always belong to me. A chill seized Jane's hands. She presented the phone to Marco. At once, a shadow crossed his face. She is escalating, attempting to unnerve you before the event. It's effective, Jane confessed, despising the tremor in her own voice. Marco took the device, relayed the text, and returned it. Terror is her final move. Do not allow her the pleasure of its success. He squeezed her shoulder. Just one more day. Endure one more day, and it will be concluded. Jane agreed, but the message lingered like a phantom. Sleep eluded her that night. She pictured her mother's expression as the presentation began, as the judgment of the room fell upon her. Would she break? Would she retaliate? Or would she somehow warp the narrative and reclaim her victimhood? On the morning of the gala, Jane rose in the pre-dawn quiet. She moved through her rituals like an automaton, the water, the coffee, the breathing techniques from Sarah. Reese arrived for a final practice, focused not on combat, but on finding her core. You are ready for this, Reese affirmed. Recall all our work. Carry yourself with pride. Never apologize. Command your ground. What if I freeze? You won't. But should you falter, you know how to find your breath, how to return. Reese's hand on her shoulder was a firm anchor. You are far more resilient than you believe, Jane. Go and show them. Elena arrived that afternoon to help with her preparations. The gown, the heels, the subtle jewelry Marco had selected. Her hair was drawn back, an act of revealing her face, not shielding it. Makeup was a mere whisper, enough for polish, but not for a performance. When Jane faced the mirror, she met the gaze of a stranger, confident, lethal, ready. In the hallway, Marco was waiting. He was attired in a black tuxedo that cost more than most cars, embodying the crime lord he was. But the sight of her caused a subtle shift in his composure. You look... He faltered, then began anew. When you walk into that room, everyone will understand exactly who you are. That's the objective, no? Yes, but I doubt you comprehend the power you're projecting right now. He presented his arm. Ready? Jane took it, feeling the solid warmth of him at her side. As I will ever be. The gala unfolded at the Grand Marquis Hotel, a jewel of Chicago's opulence. They made their entrance late, after the crowds had already gathered. The lobby was a tapestry of designer wear, the air thick with the scent of wealth and the low murmur of the elite. Jane felt the weight of every gaze as they entered. Marco's hand remained at the small of her back, a constant pressure that grounded her, that said, "I am here." As they moved through the throng, she identified the faces from her studies. Richard Carmichael lingered near the bar. Patricia Weston held court by the vast windows. And there, at the very center, a planet orbited by admirers and journalists, was Charlotte Whitmore. Her mother appeared as she always did, flawless in a cream gown, diamonds gracing her throat, her smile a perfected artifice. She was mid-sentence with a reporter when her eyes fell upon Jane. The smile froze. For a fleeting instant, raw shock broke through her facade. Then it was gone, sealed behind something colder. Their eyes locked across the expanse in the room. Charlotte excused herself and began to move toward them, a predator closing in. Jane's heart hammered against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to vanish, to flee. But she held her ground, forcing herself to breathe, to remember the woman she'd become in 14 days. Jane. Her mother's voice was a confection of sweetness, loud enough for those nearby. "Thank goodness! I was so terribly worried." She reached out, feigning an embrace. Jane took a single step back, just beyond her reach. "Don't touch me." A chill entered Charlotte's eyes, but the smile held fast. "Darling, you've been through so much." "But this is a conversation for a private place." "No." Jane's voice was firm. "We are going nowhere, and we are not speaking in private. Whatever you have to say, you can say it right here." A hush began to spread through the adjacent clusters of people. The confrontation was being noticed. Phones were emerging, cameras turning toward them. Charlotte's smile tightened. "Jane, you are clearly unwell. This man has poisoned you. Marco saved my life. You tried to destroy it." Jane felt Marco's hand press gently into her back, a silent anchor. "I know about the insurance policy. I know you sent me to him expecting him to murder me. I know everything." For a second, Charlotte's mask slipped, revealing the fury blazing underneath. Then she laughed, a sound so light and practiced. "That's preposterous. You've been fed a string of lies. The only one lying here is you." Jane's voice gained volume, each word stronger than the last. "And in approximately 30 seconds, every person in this room will know the kind of monster you truly are." Charlotte opened her mouth to argue, but the lights suddenly dimmed. The large screens arranged around the ballroom came to life, and the video began. Jane watched her mother's face as the truth unspooled on every monitor. She watched the color drain from her skin, her eyes grow wide with panic as the financial record scrolled by, followed by the photos of Jane's childhood injuries. Then the insurance policy was displayed for all to see. The ballroom had fallen deathly silent. When Jane's recorded testimony started, her own face filling the screens, her voice calm and clear, Charlotte finally moved. She spun from one screen to the next, searching for an escape that did not exist. "Turn it off," she hissed at someone nearby. "Turn it off now!" But no one moved a muscle. They were all watching, the reporters, the donors, the board members, every person who had once believed in her, championed her, and given her power. The video concluded. The screens went dark. In the ensuing silence, Charlotte Whitmore stood alone in the ballroom's center, her perfect world finally shattered. And Jane, for the first time in her entire existence, was no longer afraid. The silence stretched for an age that was likely mere seconds. Then a glass fell. The sound of crystal shattering on marble echoed like a gunshot, and the spell was broken. Everyone moved at once. Charlotte lunged for the nearest journalist. "This is a fabrication, all of it. That man." She aimed a trembling finger at Marco. "He's a criminal. He made her do this. I have copies of everything." Marco's calm voice cut through her hysteria. Financials authenticated by 3 separate forensic accountants, medical records subpoenaed from 4 different hospitals, the insurance policy filed with your signature, dated and notarized. He withdrew a flash drive from his pocket and held it high. Any journalist who wants the complete file is welcome to it, free of charge. A dozen hands shot into the air. Charlotte's face burned from pale to crimson. "You can't do this. I'll sue you for defamation, for slander, for telling the truth." Jane's voice was quiet, yet it carried. She stepped forward, moving from Marco's protective shadow to stand on her own. "You can try, but we both are aware of what discovery would reveal." Her mother's gaze locked with hers, and in that moment, Jane saw something that resembled desperation. "Jane, please. You don't know what you're doing. I am your mother. I love you. Everything I ever did was—" "Don't." The word was hard, final. "Don't you dare claim you did any of it for me. You did it for yourself. You have only ever done things for yourself." Charlotte's expression twisted into something monstrous. The mask was gone, incinerated by panic and rage. "You ungrateful little thing, after everything I gave you, you gave me nothing but scars." Jane's voice held steady, the tremors gone. "And I am done carrying them for you." A camera flash ignited the dark, then another. The journalists were documenting it all, capturing Charlotte's unraveling in real time. Jane could see the narrative shifting, crumbling with every word her mother uttered, each one a nail in her own coffin. Richard Carmichael forced his way through the spectators, his face livid. "Charlotte, is any of this true? Have you been stealing from the foundation?" "Richard, I can explain." "Can you explain $2 million in offshore accounts?" Patricia Weston appeared at his elbow, phone in hand. "Because my accountant just sent the breakdown, I'm seeing the transfers now." Her smile was sharp as a knife. "It's interesting how much of our donated money wound up in the Cayman Islands." Charlotte's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. She scanned the room, searching for an ally, for any defender, but the faces that stared back at her were all the same: shock, disgust, and betrayal. The very people who had praised her an hour before were now creating distance, backing away from the wreckage. "This isn't over," Charlotte hissed, turning back to Jane. "You think you've won? You think this destruction makes you strong? You're nothing. You've always been nothing. And when he tires of you," she gestured wildly at Marco, "when he casts you aside like the garbage you are, you'll have nowhere left to run. No one will want you." The words were expertly aimed, finding the old wounds, the places that still throbbed with pain. Jane felt that familiar panic begin its ascent. The voice inside her head whispered that maybe her mother was right. Maybe she was worthless after all. But then Marco's hand found hers, warm, steady, and real. And just like that, the panic receded. Jane looked at her mother, truly looked, and saw not the towering figure of her childhood, but a small, cruel woman whose power was built on making others feel small. Without that power, without the fear she had so carefully cultivated, Charlotte Whitmore was simply pathetic. "You're right about one thing," Jane said softly. "I was nothing. You made certain of that. But I'm not that person anymore. And you, Her gaze swept over the ruined woman. You are exactly what you have always been. The only difference is that now everyone else can see it too. Charlotte opened her mouth, but whatever she was about to say was silenced by a new voice from the crowd's edge. Charlotte Whitmore! Two men in suits moved through the onlookers, badges displayed on their belts. Detectives. Jane recognized the older one from Marco's files, a man who owed him a favor placed here tonight on standby. We have some questions regarding financial irregularities at the Children's Foundation. You'll need to come with us. I'm not going anywhere, Charlotte's voice rose to a shriek. This is harassment. I have rights. You have the right to remain silent, the detective said calmly. I would suggest you use it. It wasn't an arrest, not yet. It was simply bringing her in. But the assembled guests were blind to the truth. They saw only the spectacle of Charlotte Whitmore being led from her own gala by police, her flawless image shattered into ruin. Jane watched her mother vanish through the ballroom doors and felt a space open in her chest. It was not relief, not exactly. It was the sudden void left by a lifelong burden, one she'd forgotten she was even carrying. Marco's hand remained in hers. Lifting her gaze, she found him observing her with an expression she could not decipher. Are you all right? He murmured. I don't know, she answered with stark honesty. Ask me again tomorrow. The room around them descended into chaos, shouting journalists, clusters of arguing board members, and guests surging for the exits. The music died. The gala had officially fractured. Patricia Weston materialized before them, her eyes gleaming with cold opportunity. Mr. DeLuca, Miss Whitmore, quite the production. It wasn't a production, Jane stated. It was the truth. Even better. Patricia's smile was predatory. The Foundation's board will require new leadership, someone of integrity. I'm proposing your name, Jane, should you be interested. Jane could only blink. I know nothing about running a charity. You understand needing help and being denied it. That is a greater qualification than any of these vultures possess. Patricia surveyed the room with clear disdain. Consider it. We'll speak next week. She was gone before Jane could form a reply. Marco guided her toward a side door, away from the clamor of bodies and flashing cameras. In the quiet of a corridor, Jane finally drew a true breath. Her hands trembled. Her legs felt unsteady. The adrenaline that had sustained her through the confrontation receded, leaving an echoing emptiness inside. I need to sit, she whispered. Marco led her to a bench. Head between her knees, she focused on Sarah's cadence for calm. Breathe in for 4, hold, and out for 4. You did the right thing, Marco said, taking a seat beside her. More than right. I think I'm going to be sick. That's to be expected. You just faced the specter that has haunted your life. Your body is just now catching up. A shaky laugh escaped Jane. Is that your professional diagnosis? I've seen a few battles. One learns the shape of the quiet that follows. His tone was soft. Just breathe through it. For a long while, she sat with his steady presence beside her as the storm raged on in the ballroom. Slowly, her hands ceased to tremble. Her breathing found its rhythm. The world's violent spinning began to slow. What comes next? She asked. The police will open their case. The board will begin an audit. The press will feast on her for weeks. Marco's voice was flat, clinical. The life your mother knew is finished. The empire she built will crumble to ash. And for me, that is for you to decide. He turned, his gaze meeting hers. You are free, Jane. Truly free. Your life is your own now. The word felt alien. Freedom. A future not carved by another's cruelty. She had spent so long simply enduring that she had never learned how to live. "I don't know what I want," she confessed. "Then it's time to find out. You have time." Marco rose, extending a hand. "But for now, we leave before the press finds this corridor." They slipped out a service exit, evading the gauntlet of reporters gathered out front. Marco's car was idling, ready. As they settled into the back, the driver pulled away, leaving the ruin of the night behind them. Jane watched Chicago glitter past the glass, a city of brilliant light and deep shadow. It had been her home her entire life, but had only ever felt like a cage. Now, with her mother's dynasty in ashes behind her, she wondered at the phantom feeling of what it could mean to belong. "Thank you," she said, her voice low. "For this." Her gesture encompassed everything. Marco's face was a mask. "Don't thank me. The most difficult part is yet to come." "What do you mean?" "Your mother will retaliate. She has lawyers, connections, hidden funds. This is not over because of a single defeat." He held her gaze. "Are you prepared for that? For the war of attrition?" Jane considered it. Her mother, when trapped, was a cornered animal. She would lie, manipulate, and play the victim, using every tool she had to claw her way back. It would be a grim, draining, and prolonged fight. But the woman she was 2 weeks ago was gone. In her place was someone who knew the feeling of a straight spine, the force of a blow, the power of an unflinching gaze. She possessed a strength no one, least of all herself, had ever acknowledged. "Yes," she said, "I'm ready." The car stopped at Marco's building. They ascended in the silent elevator and he walked her to her door. "Get some rest," he advised. "Tomorrow will be a deluge. Media requests, legal inquiries, people trying to claim a piece of your new reality." A knot formed in her stomach. "I don't want to be the story." "Too late. You are." His voice, however, was gentle. "Elena will field the calls. Just focus on yourself. Call Sarah. Absorb what happened. Don't let them rush you." "And you? What is your plan?" A faint smile touched Marco's lips. "To ensure there are no legal escapes, that the proof is irrefutable, that she faces the consequences." He paused. "And that you remain safe. Desperation makes her dangerous." "You think she would do something?" "I think she has nothing left to lose." "People in that position make reckless choices." His jaw tightened. "But she will not reach you. I will see to it." A protest died on her lips, the claim that she could protect herself. The truth was, a deep solace came from knowing he stood guard. It was a faith she had never placed in another soul. "Okay," she murmured. "I'll be careful." "Good." He turned, then hesitated. "Jane, what you did in there, facing her, most people lack that courage. Be proud of that strength." He was gone before she could answer. Jane entered her room, closing the door and leaning against it. She expected triumph, but there was only a profound weariness. An exhaustion so complete it settled in her bones, making the act of changing her clothes feel monumental. She managed it, swapping the gown for soft pajamas, wiping the makeup from her skin. The mirror showed her own reflection again. Just Jane. Neither the lacquered doll from the gala nor the shattered girl of weeks past, but a new shape forming between them. Her phone vibrated with a text from Sarah. "Saw the news. Call me if you need anything, anytime." A small smile touched Jane's lips. Words were a currency she didn't possess right then, but a simple thank you text brought a sliver of comfort. Sleep seemed a distant shore, yet the moment her head met the pillow, Oblivion claimed her. A deep, dreamless slumber held her until Elena's knock came late the next morning, bringing coffee and the news that her phone was ringing incessantly. "Reporters," Elena explained, placing the tray down. "Lawyers, strangers claiming to be family. I am screening them." "Is there anyone I must speak with?" "Not if you don't wish to. Mr. DeLuca's instructions are for you to take the day. Rest. Let the world wait." But the world had no intention of waiting. Jane was only halfway through her coffee when Marco appeared, his face a mask of grim purpose. "There is a problem." A cold dread settled in her stomach. "What kind of problem?" "Your mother was released on bail an hour ago. She's holding a press conference this afternoon." He offered her his phone. A news alert painted Charlotte Whitmore's new narrative. She was the victim, framed by a daughter who had been manipulated by criminal elements in a grand conspiracy. The blood drained from Jane's hands. "She will lie. She will cast herself as the martyr. Of course, it is her final desperate gambit." Marco retrieved his phone. "The question is whether we counter or let her weave her own shroud." "What is your advice?" "She is banking on your silence, your retreat. She will portray you as a fragile puppet, unstable." His gaze was piercing. "So, I advise you to appear. Be present. Remind them all who suffered the true injury here." Her pulse hammered against her ribs. The thought of facing the cameras, the accusations, made her want to disappear. But the instinct to retreat was warring with the knowledge that to falter now would be to lose it all. "Where is the press conference?" "The Regency Hotel at noon." Marco glanced at his watch. "We have 2 hours. Then we must prepare." This time, the choice of armor was her own. Simple black trousers, a white blouse, her hair pulled back cleanly. She looked composed, a woman with nothing to conceal. When Elena's makeup artist had covered the last trace of bruising, the assured woman in the glass was a stranger even to herself. Marco awaited her by the doors, with Riza and 2 other faces from his security detail, silent sentinels to the humming storm. "Your presence is your statement," he murmured as they moved toward the vehicles. "Say nothing. Just let them see you." But silence felt like a surrender, a quiet validation of the lies her mother was poised to weave before a global audience. Someone had to tear that tapestry apart, and who better than the daughter she'd tried to unravel? A media frenzy engulfed the Regency. Flashes, microphones, and a barrage of questions. Marco's team carved a path through the chaos, delivering Jane inside without her uttering a single word. The press conference was in a ballroom that, while smaller, felt suffocating with the density of journalists. On a raised dais sat Charlotte, a portrait of manufactured grief, flanked by her 2 costly attorneys. A stylist had clearly softened her edges, crafting a maternal image with muted makeup and simple hair. She was the wronged mother, playing her part with chilling perfection. As Jane entered, Charlotte's composure fractured for a fraction of a second, a flicker of something real before the mask sealed itself again. Marco and Jane chose seats in the rear, refusing to be relegated to the shadows. Cameras turned their way as Jane, a statue of calm, prepared to watch her mother lie. Charlotte's lead counsel began, his voice a monotone drone of prepared legal denials and threats of lawsuits against Marco DeLuca. Then Charlotte approached the microphone. "I only want to begin by saying how much I love my daughter," she started, her voice trembling with practiced sincerity. "For years, Jane has battled her mental health, I've done all I could to give her the care she requires, but she recently fell prey to someone who exploited her fragility. Jane's jaw hardened. Beneath the table, Marco's hand found hers, a quiet anchor in the churning sea of deceit. The man in this room, Marco DeLuca, is a known criminal, Charlotte declared, her voice gaining strength. He leads one of Chicago's most dangerous enterprises, and for reasons beyond my understanding, he made my daughter his target. He poisoned her mind and now wields her as a weapon against her own mother. A reporter's hand shot up. Mrs. Whitmore, what of the financial discrepancies? Fabricated, one of the lawyers cut in, smooth as glass. Our own forensic team is examining the books. We are certain these claims are baseless. And the policy on her life? Another journalist shouted. For a fleeting moment, Charlotte's gaze turned to cold steel before the sorrowful mask returned. A standard part of estate planning. To twist it into something sinister reveals how low they will stoop to ruin me. Jane had heard enough. She stood, and with that single movement, she captured the focus of every camera. Charlotte's face drained of color. Jane, my love, you don't have to. Yes, Jane's voice echoed across the hall. I do, because every word from your mouth has been a lie. The room exploded into a maelstrom of shouted questions and flashing bulbs. The lawyer's attempts to regain order were lost in the tide. Jane commanded the stage now. I don't have mental health issues, Jane stated, her voice unwavering. I have PTSD from 26 years of abuse by the woman on that stage. I have records of every fracture, every bruise, every hospital visit she explained away as a childhood accident. Jane, please, Charlotte pleaded, standing with her arms outstretched as if to soothe a distraught child. Do not touch me. Do not act like you care. Jane's hands trembled, but her voice held firm. You sent me to Marco DeLuca to be killed for $2 million. That isn't love. That isn't protection. That is attempted murder. An attorney stepped toward her. Ms. Whitmore, you're obviously distraught. Let's take a recess. I am not distraught. I am finished with being silent. Jane pivoted, addressing the entire room of reporters. My mother is a predator. She has embezzled from her own foundation. She has tormented her daughter for decades, and now she performs the role of victim because she was caught. Do not be deceived. It is a masterful performance, but it is only that. The facade on Charlotte's face finally shattered. You ungrateful. She caught herself, forcing the sweet tone back. Jane, that man has twisted your thoughts against me, but I am still your mother. I will always love you despite what he's made you think. Marco didn't make me believe a thing. You did. With every blow, every insult, every moment you convinced me I deserved the pain. Jane's voice cracked on the final word, but she pressed on. The only thing Marco did was show me I could heal and that I never had to live in fear again. She turned and walked from the ballroom, Marco and his team closing ranks around her. Behind them, chaos reigned. Jane reached the car just as her strength gave out. She crumpled into the seat, fighting for breath as the adrenaline crash hit her with the force of a physical blow. Marco was beside her instantly. Breathe! You're safe! Just breathe! I couldn't let her. She just kept lying, and I know. You did what was right. His voice was a steady, grounding presence. You spoke your truth. That was all that mattered. Jane focused on the simple rhythm of her breath, and slowly the world stopped spinning. When she could speak again, she met Marco's eyes. What now? A grim smile touched his lips. Now we watched the truth do its work. The fallout was immediate. Within hours, the story was a firestorm across every Chicago news outlet, Jane's confrontation playing on a viral loop. The Foundation's board convened an emergency meeting, suspending Charlotte immediately. 3 of her largest donors publicly rescinded their support. The police department confirmed a formal investigation into the embezzlement allegations. And from the safety of Marco's tower, Jane watched the empire her mother built on lies begin to disintegrate. Sarah arrived that evening for an urgent session. For 2 hours, they spoke of trauma, of facing one's abuser, and of the hollow echo that follows the desperate cry for justice. It was a balm, if not a cure. The next morning, word came from Charlotte's legal team. They wished to discuss a settlement. What sort of settlement? Jane asked. Across the breakfast table, Marco's expression was one of pure disgust, the kind where she admits nothing but is legally bound to never contact you again. In return, you decline to press criminal charges. Jane's coffee grew cold in her hands. She wants me to let her get away with it. She wants to stay out of a cage. Yes. Marco's tone left no doubt of his opinion. What do you believe I should do? This is your decision, he said, leaning back. If you want her imprisoned, we have the evidence, but it means a trial. Months, maybe years. You will have to testify, relive every moment, face her. Jane considered it. The thought of a courtroom, of her mother's lawyers dissecting her pain for a jury, the media circus, the public scrutiny. She had just found her freedom. Did she want to spend the next year of her life shackled to that fight? And if I accept the settlement, she vanishes, a court order keeps her away. The Foundation will expel her. Her reputation, her career, her fortune, all gone. She avoids a cell, but the life she knows is over. Jane stared into her cup. Prison felt like justice. But perhaps watching her mother live in the ashes of a life she'd torched herself was its own form of justice too. Maybe that was enough. Maybe she didn't need to burn herself down just to ensure her mother was destroyed. I'll accept the settlement, she said, her voice quiet. On one condition. Name it. I want her to admit everything she did. In a signed document. A complete confession. The abuse, the embezzlement, the insurance, every last detail. And if she ever harms another soul, that confession is made public. Marco's smile was sharp as a razor's edge. My lawyers will draft the terms. Within a week, it was done. Charlotte Whitmore signed a 20-page document, an encyclopedia of her crimes. She relinquished her foundation. She accepted a permanent restraining order. She surrendered her assets to repay what she had stolen. In exchange, Jane would not pursue criminal charges. It felt strangely quiet. After a lifetime of terror and rage, the war ended, with signatures on a page. But as Jane's eyes fell upon her mother's name on that confession, she felt a knot in her chest finally come undone. It was over. In the weeks that followed, Charlotte Whitmore's world imploded. Just as Marco had foretold, the scandal became her identity. Friends abandoned her. The world of philanthropy exiled her. Her one attempt to claim coercion was silenced by Jane's lawyers, who threatened to unveil her confession. After that, Charlotte retreated into silence, vanishing from public view. Word reached Jane through Marco's channels that her mother was in some forgotten town, a nameless face forced to start over, the very fate she had so often imposed on Jane. The bitter irony resonated, but her mother was a fading echo. For the first time, Jane was listening to herself, asking who she was meant to be. The answer led her 3 months later to a skeletal warehouse on Chicago's South Side, searching for a future in its decay. The structure was a portrait of ruin, shattered windows, deep water stains, and the accumulated neglect of decades gave it the air of a crime scene. But it was hers. Every square foot was purchased with the settlement money her mother had been forced to surrender, each dollar a measure of justice. "You certain about this?" Marco murmured beside her, his critical gaze sweeping the wreckage. "No," Jane admitted quietly, "but I'm doing it anyway." Her thoughts had briefly entertained Patricia Weston's offer, a seat on a foundation board, endless meetings about fundraising, the sterile machinery of charity. It was undoubtedly important work, necessary even. Yet within those quiet conference rooms, as others spoke of vulnerable women in abstract terms, a truth had crystallized for Jane. She could not fight this war from a distance. She had to build something tangible, a place that might have saved her, a true shelter. This would not be a place of institutional chill and fluorescent glare, with rules that felt like punishment. It would be a haven for healing, a space for women to rediscover their worth beyond their trauma. The idea had first taken root in a session with Sarah. They were mapping the terrain of healing when Jane described Marco's home as a sanctuary. She spoke of its profound safety, of Elena appearing with nourishment unasked, of Risa teaching her to fight back in the gym. She recalled the therapy that untangled her mother's voice from her own. What if other women could have that? Jane had asked aloud. Not just a cot and a case number, real support. Sarah had simply smiled. Then you should be the one to build it. And so there she stood, before a condemned ruin, daring to envision it filled with life, hope, and the grace of a second chance. Marco was already on his phone. I have a contractor. He owes me. I can get a crew here tomorrow to survey this. Marco, you don't need to. I know, he interrupted softly. I want to. You're building something good. Let me help with this. Jane had learned that arguing with that tone was pointless. The past 3 months had revealed the man beneath the reputation, a man who understood survival, who respected true strength, and whose word was his bond. He was fiercely loyal, valued competence over empty sentiment, and held a quiet affinity for lost causes. She had also realized she trusted him more than anyone she had ever known, a feeling both unnerving and profoundly comforting. Okay, she breathed out. Thank you. Marco made the call. Within an hour, a gruff man named Frank, all work boots and clipped phrases, arrived to inspect the space. Jane shadowed him, taking notes, battling a sense of being overwhelmed by the project's sheer scale. Frank pointed out a litany of issues, structural, electrical, plumbing, that needed a total overhaul. It's a mountain of work, Frank declared finally, but the bones are solid, good foundation, good height. It could be something special if it's done right. How long would it take? 6 months to do it fast, 8 to do it properly. Frank was already sketching ideas in a worn notebook. You've got the whole bureaucratic maze of permits and inspections. But it is possible. A spark ignited in Jane's chest. Maybe it was hope, or maybe purpose. Let's do it properly. Frank nodded, his mind already crunching numbers. I'll have an estimate for you by Friday. After he drove off, they stood in what would become the main hall, enveloped in dust and the ghosts of the past. You're really doing this, Marco said. It was not a question. Yes, I really am, Jane affirmed, turning toward him. I know it's madness. I have no experience with any of this, but I have to. If I don't, she searched for the words. If I don't make something from what was done to me, it was all just pointless pain. This way, it can mean something. Marco's gaze softened. It already means something. You survived. That is everything. Not to me, she countered. Not anymore. She looked around the vast, empty space. I need to build something, to leave a place better than the one I found. Then you will, he stated, as if her success were an established fact. Jane longed for that kind of conviction. Perhaps this was what faith was, someone else's belief holding you up until your own could take root. The months that followed were a managed storm of paperwork, construction, and unending challenges. Jane poured her entire being into the project, learning on the fly. She found an architect who understood trauma-informed design. She gathered wisdom from social workers, therapists, and other survivors. She toured existing shelters, noting what healed and what harmed, and her vision began to solidify. It would not be a warehouse. It would be a home. 12 private rooms, each a sanctuary with its own bath. There would be a communal kitchen for shared meals or solitary comfort, a therapy room, and a gym, where Risa had already promised to teach self-defense, a playroom for children because Jane knew that was the anchor that kept so many women in peril. She decided to name it Phoenix House. Elena teased that it was too direct, but Jane loved the symbolism, rising from the fire, becoming whole. Marco remained on the periphery, a silent support system who offered help without ever overstepping. He found lawyers to handle the nonprofit filings. He ensured the construction team met every deadline. He would appear some evenings to observe the progress, hands buried in his pockets, asking questions that showed he truly saw what she was trying to create. "You are different," he observed one night as they reviewed paint samples in the unfinished kitchen. Jane looked up. "How so?" "More centered, like you have a destination now." He rested against a counter. "The first time we met, you were perpetually braced for an attack. Now you look like you would strike back." "I had a good teacher," Jane replied, putting the samples down. "Several, in fact. Risa taught me to fight. Sarah taught me to heal. Elena taught me that kindness could be unconditional." She met his gaze directly. "And you taught me that I was worth defending." A complex emotion flickered in Marco's eyes. "Jane?" "I'm not trying to make things complicated. It's just a fact." She held a deep blue swatch against the wall. "You could have abandoned me that first night. You could have let her plan succeed. You didn't. I'm standing here because of your choice." "You are standing here because of yours," Marco corrected her gently. "I just provided the space for you to make it." "Details," Jane smiled faintly. "Either way, thank you." He grew quiet, studying her with his characteristic intensity before pushing off the counter. "The blue is better than the gray," he said. "It's more welcoming." Just like that, the intimate moment dissolved. Yet something had fundamentally shifted between them, an unnamed warmth that settled in her chest. Sarah noticed it in their next session. "You seem happy," she remarked. Jane thought about it. Happy felt too simple. It was more a profound sense of rightness, of finally moving toward a destination instead of fleeing a past. "I'm creating something meaningful," Jane explained. "And Marco, how is that bond evolving?" Jane felt a flush of heat rise in her cheeks. "It's not a bond. He is just helping me." Sarah's smile was knowing. "I see. And how do you feel in his presence?" "Safe," challenged, like I can just be myself without apology. Jane paused. Is that strange? To feel that about someone who is, by definition, a criminal. Human connection is rarely so simple, Sarah said. You're allowed to feel for someone who has shown you kindness. She leaned forward. But you must also consider what you are building for your future. Does it include a partnership, or is this a time to focus only on yourself? I don't know, Jane laughed, a mix of frustration and truth. I've never seen a normal relationship. I wouldn't know what one looks like. Perhaps honesty, with herself and with him, was the first step. But the truth was a chasm she dared not approach, for Jane couldn't voice what she truly desired. So she sought refuge in Phoenix House, channeling her turmoil into the hard reality of tile and furniture, of staffing rosters. She chose her team with care. Lisa, a manager who had fled a violent husband and knew the residents' needs intimately. A pair of counselors, experts in the landscape of trauma. And a security specialist, Risa's assistant, who crafted a system that secured the perimeter without caging the souls within. Every choice was deliberate, a careful brick laid to build the sanctuary she never had. 6 months after construction began, Patricia Weston arrived, unannounced. Her sharp gaze swept the space as she posed incisive questions, giving small, measured nods. This is solid work, Patricia conceded at last. You should bring this before the Foundation's board. We hold discretionary funds for endeavors like this. It could cover your operations for the initial 2 years. Jane just stared. You would consider that? With a compelling proposal, yes. The Foundation must restore its image after your mother's scandal. Backing a venture led by her daughter, the very woman who brought her down, paints us as principled. Patricia's smile was a precise calculation. Besides, the work is genuinely good. That helps. The board meeting was set for 3 weeks away. Jane poured every waking second into her preparation, forging a presentation that outlined the mission, budget, and future impact of Phoenix House. Marco coached her, assuming the role of skeptic, launching the same difficult questions the board would. What sets this apart from current shelters, he challenged. We offer more than just a roof. We provide total support, therapy, career training, legal aid, childcare. Everything a woman requires to truly forge a new life, not just endure. Jane advanced the slide. Existing shelters are vital, but they are strained and under-resourced. We propose a more focused, intensive model, smaller but with a deeper reach. Marco nodded, his expression approving. Stronger. And your plan for long-term viability? They drilled it repeatedly until the entire pitch was etched into her memory. When the day of the meeting came, she was as prepared as possible. The presentation unfolded better than she could have imagined. Board members posed challenging questions, yet their interest seemed sincere. Patricia provided support at crucial moments, lending authority to Jane's plans. And when the vote was cast, it was unanimous. The Foundation would underwrite Phoenix House for 2 years, with renewal contingent on its success. Jane exited the room, feeling as though she could finally draw a full breath. She phoned Marco at once. We did it. We have full funding. His voice was rich with warmth. I never doubted you would. You were magnificent. I was petrified. Terror and brilliance can coexist. She could feel his smile through the phone. Congratulations, Jane. You've earned this. After the call, Jane remained in her car for a long while, simply letting it sink in. A year prior, she was a ghost, a woman so shattered she had resigned herself to death. Now she was the head of a nonprofit, on the cusp of opening a haven that would save countless women from the hell she had endured. The change felt surreal, as if it belonged to another person's story. But it was hers. She had built this from nothing but agony, resolve, and a defiant hope her mother had failed to extinguish. Phoenix House opened its doors on a crisp November morning. Jane stood inside the finished common area, the walls a deep, soothing blue, the furniture arranged for quiet connection, sunlight pouring through the newly fortified windows, and felt a profound emotion rise in her chest. It was perfect. Not in a polished, sterile sense. It felt like a true home, a space where healing was possible. Elena had added the finishing touches with plants and art that breathed life into the rooms. Marisa had installed a heavy bag in the gym, ready for the self-defense courses she would lead. Sarah had designed the therapy suite with plush chairs and gentle lighting. Each person who had helped Jane piece her own life back together had now helped build this space for others. And Marco. He had appeared that morning, bearing coffee and pastries for the staff, deflecting any praise for his own immense contributions. "This day is yours," he had told her when she tried to thank him. "Allow yourself this moment." The first resident, a young woman named Maria, 23, came that afternoon with a bruised cheek and a small girl clinging to her. Lisa greeted them, led them to their room, and gently explained how things were run. Jane observed from afar, remembering the dizzying feeling of stepping into safety for the first time, how alien and untrustworthy it had seemed. Maria's daughter, 4-year-old Sophia, saw the playroom and let out a small gasp. "Mama, look, toys, you can play, my love," Maria whispered. "You are safe here." Jane had to turn away before the tears came. She found Marco in the kitchen, leaning against a counter with his coffee, granting her the space she needed. "Our first residents are here," Jane said, her voice thick. "I saw." His tone was soft. "How are you holding up?" "I'm not sure. This feels monumental. What if I'm not enough to help her? What if all of this is just me faking it?" "Then you will learn, just as you have learned everything else." Marco put his mug down. "Jane, you created this. You spun something real and beautiful from your own suffering. That requires a bravery few people possess. It is time to stop doubting that. It's not so easy. For 26 years, my mother drilled into me that I was nothing. Your mother was mistaken about everything, most of all about you." He folded his arms. "Just look. This place is here because you willed it into being. That isn't nothing, that is power." Jane met his gaze, truly saw him, and felt a tectonic shift inside her. This man who had rescued her unasked, who had helped her dismantle her mother's dark legacy, who had been a steady presence through every harrowing step of her rebirth, and who had demanded nothing. For months, she had been quietly falling for him, but refused to admit it, deeming it too complex, too raw, too soon, after her mother's reign. But perhaps Sarah's advice was right. Perhaps it was time for the truth. "Marco, she faltered, her resolve vanishing. He simply waited, his patience a constant. "Thank you," she finished lamely, "for everything. For seeing something in me when I saw nothing." A shadow, maybe disappointment, crossed his features before he just nodded. Always. The chance was lost. Jane returned to her duties, welcoming new arrivals and overseeing the staff. But the weight of her unspoken words followed her into the quiet hours. Phoenix House reached capacity in short order. Women came to them, wounded and afraid, their trauma a heavy, invisible burden. Jane saw them begin to slowly unfurl, to accept the safety around them, to believe they were worthy of more. In each one, she recognized a piece of herself. The nervous flinch, the constant apologies, the way they tried to shrink, as if to exist was to impose. And then she saw them mend, as therapy, community, and security performed their gradual, essential magic. She saw women who had been broken rise, their voices growing stronger, their spines straighter, their spirits rediscovering the will to fight. It was draining and magnificent, precisely as Jane had dreamed. 3 months in, she was working late in her office, poring over a grant application, when Marco materialized in her doorway. "You are still here," he observed. "As are you." Jane capped her pen. "What isn't?" Marco entered, shutting the door softly behind him. His expression was grave, sending a chill through Jane's stomach. "I have something to tell you," he stated. Jane steeled herself. "All right, I am leaving it." He said the words plainly, as if they weren't the most staggering thing he could utter. The entire family enterprise. "I am finished." Jane could only stare. "What? Why?" "Because I am done with that existence. I am weary of the violence, the paranoia, the endless watch for the next betrayal." He sank into the chair opposite her. "The thought has been with me for some time now, since the evening we met, to be honest. Witnessing you remake your life from the ashes showed me that I could do it too, that I could choose a different path. What will you do now? Legitimate ventures. I have investments and properties. There is enough clean capital to begin anew." His eyes locked with hers. "And I want to be of use here. With Phoenix House. Not with money. You no longer require that from me. But with security, with legal matters, with all the unseen work that allows a place like this to function." Jane's heart hammered against her ribs. "You want to work with me. I want to work with you, for you, in any way that helps." He leaned closer. "Jane, for 20 years, I built an empire I no longer want. To witness you creating something with purpose, it showed me the hollowness of my own existence. I need to be a part of something genuine, and I need to be near you as I do it." His words settled in the space between them. "Marco," Jane's voice was a tremor, "are you telling me what I believe you're telling me?" "I'm telling you that I care for you. I have for months. Helping you has been the most meaningful thing I've done in years. If you feel even an echo of what I feel, then I have to see what this could become." He paused. "But know this, I am not the man I was. I'm choosing a different path. For me, yes, but for you too." Jane rose, moved from behind her desk, and did what she had longed to do for months. She pressed her lips to his. It was a question at first, a test. But as Marco's arms folded around her, it answered itself with a deep certainty. It felt like shelter. When they parted, Jane was struggling for breath. "I have wanted to do that for some time," she confessed. Marco's smile was authentic and warm, a universe away from the cold veneer of their first meeting. "You should have. I was terrified of ruining this, of what would happen if I lost you." "You are not going to lose me." He cupped her jaw. "I'm here, Jane. Whatever this becomes, wherever it leads, I am completely here." She believed him, not for his words, but for the proof she had witnessed over the last year. Marco DeLuca honored his commitments, and if he declared he was choosing her, choosing this new life, he meant it to his core. "All right," she breathed, "then we'll navigate this together." The following 6 months were a lesson in creation. Marco began the slow process of untangling from his syndicate, ceding control to his lieutenant, making his exit final. It was not a clean break. Some saw it as a ploy, a trick to lure them in, and they tried to drag him back. But his resolve was iron, and in time they relented. He took a condo near Phoenix House. He began appearing at dinner, speaking with residents, becoming a quiet, masculine presence untethered to violence. He was cautious, reverent, never overstepping. And slowly the women came to trust him as Jane had. Riza found the situation hysterical. Never thought I'd witness Marco DeLuca serving pasta to survivors of abuse. The world is strange, Marco replied softly, stirring the marinara. Jane watched him move through this new reality, so alien to the one he had abandoned, and felt a quiet settle deep in her soul. This was right, it wasn't perfect. Nothing ever is, but it was right where it counted. They moved slowly, the two of them discovering what a relationship could be when not forged in fear or power. He showed her what safety felt like. She showed him that to be vulnerable was not to be weak. They argued on occasion, over money, over the long hours she worked, over his protective streak that sometimes bordered on possessive. But they learned to fight with honor, to own their mistakes, and to choose one another even when it was difficult. Sarah, of course, approved. You're both putting in the work, that's what counts. Elena was more direct. It's about damn time you two sorted this out. I saw this coming from day one. Riza just slammed a fist on Marco's shoulder, swearing she'd shatter both his kneecaps if he hurt Jane. He promised she would have her chance if he ever did. 1 year after the doors opened, Jane stood before the staff and residents to mark their anniversary. The main room was overflowing. Women who had graduated from the program and started anew. Women still living there. Staff, volunteers, and Marco, leaning against the back wall, arms crossed, pride etched on his face. When I began this, Jane started, her voice unwavering despite the emotion constricting her throat. I wanted to forge the sanctuary that could have saved me, a place for women to be defined by more than their pain, where they could reclaim their wholeness, their right to safety, and their own second chance. Her eyes scanned the room, landing on familiar faces. Maria, who had come with a bruised face and was now in nursing school. Keisha, who had arrived so shattered she was mute for a week and now ran support groups. Amara, who had appeared with 3 children and 0 hope, now holding a full-time job and saving for her own place. You have all shown me that healing is never a straight line. It is chaotic and brutal and can feel impossible, but it is always worth the fight. Every time. Jane's voice finally broke. Thank you for your trust. Thank you for the courage it took to choose yourselves. And thank you for proving that survival itself can blossom into something beautiful. The applause was a wave of sound. Women rose to their feet, cheering, some weeping. Jane felt her own tears fall and made no move to stop them. When the gathering quieted, she found Marco in the garden they'd planted out back. He sat on a bench, his face angled toward the last of the sun. That was powerful, he said as she joined him. We did something good. This place wouldn't exist without you. Ah, I suspect you'd have managed. But his smile was genuine. They sat in a shared, easy silence, watching the city begin to glitter as night descended. I've been thinking, Marco said at last. About? About the road ahead. For us? He shifted to face her. I love you, Jane. I think I have since you took my hand in my office, ready to go to war. I want to build a life with you, a real one. Jane's heart stuttered. Marco, I'm not asking. Not now. I know we're still finding our footing. He laced his fingers through hers. But I need you to know my direction. I am heading toward a future that has you in it. For good. Jane gazed at this man who had saved her, who had stood with her as she pieced herself back together, who had willed himself to be better after she showed him what better was. She remembered the girl from a year ago, broken and mute, drowning in her own worthlessness. That girl could never have dreamed of this. A life founded on purpose, not pain, with people who chose to be there, and a man who loved her not in spite of her scars, but for the battles she had endured to earn them. I love you too, she whispered, and I want that future with you. Marco's kiss was gentle and absolute, a silent vow for all the days they would build together. As they drew apart, Jane glanced back at Phoenix House. Light shone from the windows. Within those walls, women were safe, were healing, were learning that their value was not determined by what was done to them. Her mother had tried to unmake her, to turn her into a ghost. Instead, Jane became a force her mother's hate could never undo. A woman who survived, who chose to rise again, who alchemized her agony into a purpose that would outlive them all. Phoenix House would shelter hundreds of women, maybe thousands, every one of them a testament to the harsh truth Jane had learned. Survival is only the start. The real victory is the daily choice to truly live. And Jane Whitmore, no longer a shadow, no longer silent, no longer afraid, was finally incandescently alive.
Lesson: the moment a victim stops accepting the script, the villain's countdown begins. He would tell the audience this was not just a mafia drama. This was a live demonstration of what happens when a person gets treated like a disposable object for too long, and then suddenly decides not to die on schedule. Jane was supposed to be the easiest pawn on the board. Her mother thought she had it all figured out. Cash in the insurance, erase the daughter, keep the image spotless, game over. Clean, efficient, evil. But that was the fatal mistake. The villain did not understand the oldest rule in every revenge story ever made. The person everyone overlooks is usually the one who blows the whole empire apart. And that is the life lesson. People who reduce others to usefulness always believe they control the ending. They think power is permanent because fear has been working so far, but fear has a shelf life. The second the victim realizes that surviving one more day is already an act of rebellion, the balance changes, fast. Jane did not become powerful because she was suddenly fearless. She became dangerous because she had nothing left to lose and finally found one reason to keep breathing. That is how real turning points happen in life, not with fireworks, not with confidence. With one decision, one stubborn no, one quiet refusal to disappear. Meanwhile, the mother kept performing, kept smiling, kept acting like optics were reality, classic villain behavior. But image is a weak shield when truth shows up with receipts. The lesson hits hard. If someone builds their world by humiliating, using, or exploiting people, then their downfall is already loading in the background. It is just waiting for one witness to speak. So he would hammer it home for the audience like this: the biggest comeback does not start when life becomes fair. It starts when the person who has been treated like collateral finally says, in action if not in words, not anymore.